One of the least discussed ways to get second citizenship is through marriage. Whether you're already married or you're planning on getting married, today I'm going to share with you 8 Latin America and Caribbean countries where you can get citizenship through your marriage. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist. We're the channel and the company that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. That includes having a second passport to make sure you're protected no matter what happens. And citizenship by marriage is one way that you can do that. Obviously, being married comes with its own requirements, whether you're already married or you're looking for someone. However, if you're married to someone, you may be able to get a passport relatively quickly without spending a lot of money, without necessarily even having to spend time in the country. So let's talk about 8 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean where you can do just that. The first is the Bahamas. Honestly, one of the best passports in the world that no one knows about. There are some parts of the world, I think like parts of South America, the Bahamas passport is not as strong in. But you want to talk about going to top-tier countries. The Bahamas is a very strong passport. Plus, you've got access historically to countries like China. It makes it a unique passport. Plus, you've got the proximity to the U.S. There's a lot of pros to this, to where when they talked about coming out with a citizenship by investment program a year ago, still haven't. The idea was this was going to be substantially more expensive than any other Caribbean citizenship. And if you're a woman who's married to a Bahamian man, you can apply for citizenship by registration, which means the process goes relatively quickly. You're just waiting for bureaucracy. You can get one of the best passports with relative simplicity if you are married. Unfortunately, only applies to women who are marrying local men. Similar procedure in Barbados. Not quite as good of a passport. Historical access to Canada. One of the better passports in the Caribbean. Good travel. Again, a lot of places in the world. Really a solid passport in the Caribbean. If you're a woman and you're married to a local man, you can apply for citizenship by registration. Now, let's go on the mainland of Central America, Belize. Commonly touted as an English-speaking country. The passport actually is not nearly as good, considering that they speak English and they have common law and all that. When you compare it to Guatemala, Honduras, even El Salvador, Nicaragua, the passport's not as good. You don't have as much travel flexibility. But what you do have is you have travel to the UK and Ireland and Singapore and places like that. If you are married to a Belizean, you can get citizenship in as little as 1 year. So it's not the worst complimentary passport. Certainly there's some tax incentives to living there. Certainly a very small, peaceful country. If you're watching and you're from the US or the UK or Australia, wouldn't be a bad passport to have. You can get that in as little as 1 year. Let's go down to Bolivia in South America. This is a passport. We've looked at Bolivia pretty extensively and figured out that unless you're qualifying by marriage, there's really not a lot of interest. I mean, it's not a tax haven. If you want to get citizenship, you really need to live there for a substantial amount of time. They have some residence programs. They're not terrible, but they're not really as competitive when you compare to other countries in the Americas, where there's lots of different residence programs available. But the pathway to citizenship is 3 years. If you're married, you can shorten that to 2 years. So certainly it's an interesting country. I don't know if it's up and coming, but it's an interesting place. I know there's some YouTubers who live there. You want a passport in 2 years. Also an interesting one in that you have that access to Russia. They've historically had more of an Eastern alignment, so again, could be an interesting complementary passport. Bolivian citizenship, you can obtain that in just a couple of years. Brazil, much stronger passport. Of course, also in South America. We've talked before about how giving birth in Brazil gives you access to your child, of course, being Brazilian, and then you can go and apply for immediate permanent residence, and after 1 year, you can start the process for citizenship. The challenge of that was always that you needed to live there a good chunk of that year, which probably means you're going to be a taxpayer. And then the other part of the process was, well, for a year or two, after that, you're kind of in limbo, and maybe you should spend some of that time there. And so it's kind of a couple-year process to do it. So whether you have give birth to a child there or whether you adopt a Brazilian child, that was one way to do it. But the thing that doesn't get as much talk is if you marry someone who's Brazilian, you can also get on the same 1 year track. And so you're going to be putting in some time there. It's going to be a lifestyle commitment. It's potentially going to be a tax commitment, but you can get that citizenship by marrying a Brazilian. I know a lot of people who love Brazilians. Colombia, 2 years. So normally it's a 5-year process. You can shorten that to as little as about 2 years. I think it's actually not going to take you 2 years, but theoretically 2 years in Colombia. Again, almost all these South American countries, you can just go around with an ID card. So it's very interesting for what could be a very good place to have access to in the coming years. Most of it's south of the equator. Not necessarily the best tax policies in some of these countries, but you've got good access to a rather open part of the world. And with Colombia, very interesting country, visa-free travel to countries like Russia. About 6 years ago, we got access to Europe, so now it's not really a bad passport. Colombia, just a matter of years. Costa Rica. It's going to take you quite a while to get Costa Rican citizenship by living there, and I know that because we have a number of people who are going to Costa Rica to take advantage of the great lifestyle. Lots of people love Costa Rica, and they don't mind living there. The tax incentives that they offer appear to be staying after a scare earlier this year, but it's going to take you a while, and you're going to have to live there. What you're going to get by being married to a Costa Rican is 2 years, so substantially reduced timeline to naturalization. Plus, what I understand is they're going to allow you to bypass the language test. So if you don't speak the language, then that's fine. You can get your citizenship in 2 years. And by the way, excellent citizenship. All the Central American citizenships, people kind of look down on them. And I've known people who are Nicaraguan, people who are Honduran. They're always very nervous about their citizenship. I don't want it. I don't need it. It's not respected. I mean, certainly, certain parts of the world may look at those citizenships in a certain way. I think that part of that is how you look, how you carry yourself. Do you look like you're going to be a problem if you go to the UK, for example? But most of those Central American countries, I mean, they can go to the UK, they can go to Europe, they can go to Russia. These are really nice passports that just so happen to not have visa-free access to only a couple of countries like the US. Here's a country that does have visa-free access to almost all the same countries as the US, and that's Mexico. Again, we've talked about the idea of having a child in Mexico to get yourself on a track to faster citizenship. You can do the same thing by marrying as well. Now, you're going to need to learn Spanish, you're going to need to learn about Mexican history and the Constitution, but you can shorten the timeline down to 2 years. And you're going to need to spend a pretty good chunk of your time in Mexico. Interesting, kind of complex tax system, possibly some tax planning to be done. Hey, I can think of a lot worse places to spend the majority of 2 years to get a citizenship that gets you access visa-free to Canada, to New Zealand, to Europe. I mean, pretty much everywhere that you'd want to go, again, except for the US and except for Australia, two of the most difficult countries to go to. They have opened up so many other places in the world that Mexican passport really one of the best. And so if you are married, this is one thing people often ignore. They'll look at their family tree going up. They'll look at parents. They'll look at grandparents. They often don't look at their spouse. Do they qualify for a citizenship through their spouse? There are others where you can just get a residence permit and eventually it'll lead to citizenship in other parts of the world. But in Latin America and the Caribbean, they really make it a lot easier in these countries to get citizenship. There's always going to be bureaucracy. There may be a language requirement. But in as little as a year or so, getting some of these passports, these are not bad passports. And so if you're already married or if you're out in the dating world, obviously we don't suggest you get married just to get married. But if you find someone, I mean, plenty of people are in Colombia, plenty of people are in Mexico, plenty of people in Brazil. Regardless, if you get married, that could be a path to a second passport. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.